Phil Mickelson's wife Amy has filed for divorce after leaked texts exposed his full downfall. This isn't clickbait. This is the complete collapse of golf's most beloved family man. The PGA Tour is in chaos, and the man who was supposed to be the anti-Tiger is now facing total destruction. And honestly, the pure, unadulterated irony makes me sick. Regular fans are struggling to afford greens fees and equipment, yet these country club elites are destroying their own families over ego and entitlement. Phil had everything: the adoration of millions, a wife who stood by him through gambling and insider trading, a legacy as golf's great family man, and he threw it all away for what? Leaked texts and secret rendezvous. It is a disgrace, proving these spoiled athletes care about nothing but their own appetites. But look past the surface outrage. Phil Mickelson isn't just a fallen hero. He is a case study in how unchecked ego can destroy everything. The texts that surfaced, the allegations that followed, the pattern that emerged, it all points to one thing: a man who thought he was untouchable. Over the next few minutes, I'll show you what was in those messages, who sent them, and why Amy finally made the decision that nobody thought she would ever make. Personally, I think Amy made the only move she had left. Do you agree she waited too long? Drop it below. And if real golf stories are what you're here for, you're in the right place. Subscribe. To understand why Amy's decision matters so much, you have to understand who she is and what she's already survived. Phil and Amy Mickelson got married back in November 1996. That's 30 years of marriage, 3 children, a life built together in the public eye, while Phil became one of the most beloved athletes in the world. She wasn't just a golfer's wife, she was the golf wife, the one who stood beside him through every victory, every defeat, every controversy. When Phil won his first major at the Masters in 2004, Amy was there. When he finally won the Open Championship in 2013 to complete the career Grand Slam, Amy was there. When he became the oldest major champion in history at the 2021 PGA Championship, Amy was right there on the 18th green, hugging him, crying with him, celebrating like it was their first win all over again. That image is what fans remember: Phil and Amy, the perfect golf family, the antidote to Tiger Woods and his very public scandals. Phil was supposed to be different, the family man, the one who hugged his kids after every win, the one who kissed his wife on camera and made you believe in fairy tales. And Amy played that role perfectly for decades. She was graceful, supportive, and never once complained about the cameras or the pressure. But behind that image, things were happening that nobody saw, and Amy kept quiet. She stood by Phil through the gambling addiction he eventually admitted to. She stood by him when his friend Billy Walters went to prison for insider trading, and Walters later claimed Phil had wagered over $1 billion on sports. She stood by him when he left the PGA Tour for LIV Golf and became the face of golf's biggest civil war. She stood by him when Rory McIlroy publicly accused Phil of blowing up the sport. Through all of that controversy, criticism, and chaos, Amy stayed, and that's exactly why her decision now is so devastating, because something crossed a line that even Amy couldn't ignore. And the first sign that something was seriously wrong came in a place nobody expected: a grocery store parking lot in San Diego. In July 2026, Amy Mickelson was photographed at a Trader Joe's with her daughter Amanda Bryn. Nothing unusual about that. But when the cameras zoomed in, they caught something that made the entire golf world stop: her left hand, the one that had worn a wedding ring for 30 years. That hand was bare. No wedding ring, not a single piece of jewelry on that finger. Now, Amy has never been someone who makes public statements. She doesn't post on social media, she doesn't give interviews. She communicates through actions. And that action in a Trader Joe's parking lot told everyone exactly what they needed to know. The marriage that survived gambling, survived insider trading, survived the LIV defection, survived every whisper and every rumor, had finally reached its breaking point. The question everyone wanted answered was simple: what finally pushed her over the edge? The answer to that question came in a different form. Not from Amy, not from Phil, but from someone who had been silent for years, someone whose story would change everything. Her name is Ashley Perez, and she knows exactly what Phil Mickelson is capable of. Ashley was married to Pat Perez, a fellow professional golfer, who also eventually joined LIV. Back in 2015, she was 27 years old, young, excited to be part of the golf world. She and Pat were invited to stay at a villa Phil had rented during the Barclays tournament at Plainfield Country Club in New Jersey. It seemed like a generous gesture. a chance to get to know one of the game's biggest stars. But what happened inside that villa would haunt Ashley for years, and it would eventually become the spark that ignited Phil's complete downfall. The three of them were drinking wine on the patio. Pat excused himself to use the restroom, and in that moment, Phil pulled out his phone. He showed Ashley a full-body picture of himself, naked, with an erection, flexing one bicep. And then he said the words that would change everything. "I'm going to leave my bedroom door open tonight. When Pat falls asleep, I want you to come see me." Ashley was stunned. She told Pat about the incident immediately after the tournament, but this wasn't just one moment. Ashley later revealed that Phil had been texting her frequently before the Barclays, good morning texts, messages that she now describes as grooming behavior. When Ashley finally went public with her story, she posted a powerful statement on Instagram. "I will rise up and stand next to the millions of women who have been silenced to protect the evil and darkness that lurks amongst us." Phil's camp responded quickly. His lawyer called the Scratch investigation reckless. A spokesperson said that some allegations were false and that others revisit mistakes he had already acknowledged. They suggested there was a misunderstanding for which he later apologized. But they also added that his willingness to apologize should not be misconstrued as an admission of every allegation made against him. Ashley's story wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern that had been building for years, and once the first domino fell, the rest followed fast. Let me take you through the timeline of Phil's complete collapse. It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow unraveling that accelerated in 2026. The peak came first. In 2021, Phil became the oldest major champion in golf history. He won the PGA Championship at age 50. It was supposed to be the crowning achievement of a legendary career, but that win at Kiowa Island turned out to be the final highlight, the last great moment before everything started to fall apart. In 2022, Phil shocked the golf world by joining LIV Golf. He became one of the first major defectors, leaving the PGA Tour for a Saudi-backed league that was tearing the sport apart. He made derogatory comments about the Saudis even while taking their money. And he missed the Masters for the first time since 1994. The man who had once been the face of the PGA Tour was now its biggest traitor. Rory McIlroy later accused Phil of blowing up golf, but that wasn't the worst of it. Between 2023 and 2025, Phil's gambling addiction became public knowledge in the worst possible way. His friend Billy Walters went to prison for insider trading, and Walters later wrote a book claiming Phil had wagered over $1 billion on sports. Phil eventually admitted to having a gambling problem. He released a statement saying he had taken responsibility and gotten help, but the damage was already done. And then 2026 happened, and everything collapsed completely. In February, Phil withdrew from the first two LIV events. He cited a family health matter. In March, he made his only competitive start of the year and finished tied for 48th in South Africa. In April and May, he missed the Masters and the PGA Championship, two major championships that had been staples of his career for decades. Then came June, and that's when the real nightmare began. Phil was at the Farms Golf Club in Rancho Santa Fe, California, a private club where he had been a member for years, and according to reports, he was involved in an incident with a female employee. Non-consensual and inappropriate physical contact. He was asked to leave mid-round. The club conducted a thorough independent investigation, and they revoked his membership. Phil's spokesperson said any misunderstanding had been cleared up, but the club's statement was clear. This individual is no longer a member. That same month, journalist Alan Shipnuck published a bombshell investigation for Scratch. The report alleged a pattern of inappropriate conduct by Phil stretching back roughly a decade. It claimed he was no longer welcome at 3 California golf clubs. It included Ashley Perez's story, and it revealed something even more disturbing. Phil had allegedly paid young staffers to take his phone and drive around the course. Why? So Amy, who was tracking his phone, would think he was golfing while he was actually having affairs. He would give his phone to a young man in the pro shop and pay him $500 to drive around the course for 3 or 4 hours. Amy was tracking his phone. That way, she would think he was out on the golf course. That gave Phil the time to sneak over to this guy's house and have his secret rendezvous. Members of the club later said everyone knew what was going on. The phone tracking allegation is devastating. It's not just about cheating. It's about the systematic deception, the calculated lies, the money paid to cover his tracks. And once you see that, you understand why Amy finally walked away. By August, Phil's career was in serious jeopardy. He had played only one LIV event all year, His teammates on the High Flyers GC had replaced him with Scott Vincent. Brendan Steele, one of his teammates, was asked about Phil's absence. He said they obviously wanted Phil there. They wished him well. But the subtext was clear. Phil was gone. His teammates had moved on without him. But the biggest blow came from the woman who had been by his side for 3 decades. Amy's decision to file for divorce, and the leaked texts that exposed everything, was the final nail in the coffin. So what does all of this mean for the PGA Tour? Why does Phil's personal collapse affect the sport as a whole? The answer is simple. Phil was the face of the LIV defection. He was the first major star to jump, and his departure helped create the civil war that has torn professional golf apart. He took other top players with him. He made the Saudi-backed league credible. And he burned his bridges with the PGA Tour so thoroughly that there's no way back. Reports indicate he detonated and destroyed his relationship with the tour. Even if LIV collapses, and there are serious questions about Saudi funding continuing after 2026, Phil can't just go back. The family man image that made him so marketable is completely destroyed. For 2 decades, Phil was marketed as the anti-Tiger, the loyal husband, the devoted father. Tiger was the scandal. Phil was the safe choice. And now Phil's fall is arguably worse, because he didn't just cheat. He systematically deceived everyone. Let's take a moment to look at each of the key players in this story individually. First, Phil Mickelson himself, 6-time major winner, once the most beloved player in golf, now facing total collapse. His marriage is over. His career is in jeopardy. His reputation is destroyed. He released a statement saying his priority was to become the husband, father, and man his family deserves. But those words sound hollow now. Second, Amy Mickelson, 30 years of marriage. She stood by him through gambling, insider trading, and the LIV defection. She was the glue that held everything together. The wedding ring sighting in San Diego was her silent statement. Her bare hand said everything. Her reported demand that Phil leave the Madison Club shows she was already drawing boundaries years ago. And her silence now is the loudest message of all. Third, Ashley Perez, the woman who finally broke the silence. Her story about the 2015 Barclays incident was the match that started the fire. She was 27 years old. She was groomed with text messages. She was shown a naked photo. She was propositioned while her husband was in the bathroom, and she had the courage to speak up, knowing she would face online attacks. Fourth, Pat Perez, Ashley's ex-husband and a fellow LIV golfer. He was in the other room when Phil made his move on Ashley. He learned about it immediately after the tournament, and he now finds himself in an impossible position, his ex-wife's accusations against his professional colleague. Fifth, Alan Shipnuck, the journalist who broke the story. His scratch investigation exposed the decade-long pattern of misconduct. He documented the club incidents. He reported the Ashley Perez allegations. He uncovered the phone tracking scheme. And he did it while Phil's camp called the investigation reckless. Shipnuck did what journalists are supposed to do. He followed the evidence. And he published the truth. Sixth, Brendan Steele, Phil's LIV teammate on the High Flyers GC. He publicly said they wanted Phil there. They wished him well. But the reality is that Phil has been replaced. Scott Vincent is now in his spot. The message was clear. Phil's career with LIV is effectively over. These 6 people are at the center of one of the biggest scandals in golf history. So where does this leave us? What does Phil Mickelson's complete fall from grace mean for the future of golf? First, it means the end of an era. Phil Mickelson was one of the most dominant and beloved players of his generation. He won 6 majors. He was a fan favorite. He seemed like the nice guy. And now that image is completely shattered. Second, it means the lesson that nobody is untouchable. Phil had everything: adoration, wealth, a loving family, a legendary career, and he threw it all away. For what? Text messages, secret rendezvous, deceptions that he thought nobody would ever discover. He thought he was untouchable, and he was wrong. Third, it means the PGA Tour is still in chaos. The civil war with LIV Golf hasn't ended. The players are still divided, and Phil's collapse is just one more symptom of a sport that seems to be falling apart. Fourth, it means the fans have lost a hero. Golf fans invest in these players. They cheer for them. They defend them when others criticize. And when a player falls as hard as Phil has, it hurts the fans too. Phil Mickelson built a legacy on being the people's champion. The guy who smiled. The guy who hugged his wife. The guy who made you believe that nice guys could finish first. And now he's the cautionary tale that proves even the greatest can fall. Amy walked away. The fans are walking away. The tour has moved on. And Phil Mickelson is left standing alone, wondering how it all went so wrong. The leaked texts exposed the truth. Amy's divorce filing confirmed it. And now the man who was supposed to be golf's ultimate family man has lost the family that made that image possible. That's the story. That's the collapse. And that's why the PGA Tour is in chaos. Personally, I think Amy made the hardest decision of her life, and the right one. What do you think? Did she wait too long? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more real golf stories, hit subscribe. We'll keep you updated on everything that comes next.